make a pit stop, because then they've got to repass all the people they've been ahead of from the beginning. So a lot of strategy is going to be thought out and basically worked out at the end of this session.
Yeah, and overtaken, of course, not the easiest thing we've seen here in Kyalama over the last couple of days. There, a red number 5 in the Williams. He's on pole position, and the man has been outstanding in all the qualifying sessions. A little dent in the Mansell machine, maybe a spin-off in the last timed qualifying session, but overall we can say that Williams, Renault and Nigel Mansell have been excellent in all the qualifying sessions.
Well, they've just been totally dominant, and Nigel Mansell, I think that was a little indulgence that he had on Saturday afternoon when he did have the spin. He basically said he was following Ayrton Senna, and I think what was in his mind was, I'm going to really show Senna just how quick I am and how quick my Williams is. And he came into the Nashua corner. The car started to slide. He didn't think it was a problem, but in fact when the car ought to stop sliding, it didn't. It just kept on going, and it dragged him into the sand traps. Little glitch in Nigel's weekend, but really didn't do him any harm at all. He came back to the pits, got into the spare car, and the closing moments of the second qualifying session did a blistering lap quicker than he had done all weekend, and just reconfirmed the position that he has created for himself in 92, and also that the Williams have created for themselves. They've got a car which is technically more advanced than anybody else here in Kyalami. Their principal rivals, McLaren, have been more conservative in their approach. They've not introduced their automatic gearbox. They have not introduced their active ride suspension system. They're holding that back for later in the season. It may come in Mexico, it could be seen in Brazil, but what they really want to do is get these first 3 flyaway races out of the way and then introduce the new car for the European season. Conservatism is the word that Ron Dennis is looking to the 92 season with. Fundamentally, conservatism won the 91 championship, but 92 is going to be very, very tough. Williams have made the commitment. They're here with a very advanced car, and they may well reap the benefits of that decision.
Looking at Ayrton Senna, 3 times world champion, and of course world champion last year. The man wasn't really happy. He had a spin on the Friday afternoon session, and he said yesterday the car was better, but still way off the pace of Nigel Mansell. As you said, he was at one stage nearly 2 seconds off. Well, you might as well be 2 years off, you said, because it's just a mega amount of time. Ayrton, though, he knows it's going to be 75 laps. He knows it's going to be a long race, and he said yesterday after qualifying, not necessarily the fastest car is going to win the race, because you've got to get to the finish line first to finish first. But McLaren, undoubtedly, they're under pressure, and Ron Dennis yesterday said under the circumstances it was a reasonable performance, but not quite good enough, which is quite right.
It's very true. I mean, Ron couldn't be more accurate, but really, I think the team, the McLaren team, have done a tremendous job, because they've done the best they could with their equipment. Remember, this is fundamentally a 1991 car. The 92 car, as I said a minute ago, will not be introduced until the team is totally convinced and confident that they will have reliability from the word go. They know that a 16-race world championship with all rounds counting means that you've got to be careful. You can't be too outrageous in your decision making. So this is what they've done. Of course, Ayrton Senna is saying, oh Ron, please, I want my new car. But Ron Dennis runs the team. He's not looking at one race, he's looking at 16 races. And I know Ayrton Senna will appreciate that decision. Now here we are in car with Ayrton Senna, coming down, passing Eric van der Poel. This is a very quick right and left just after the pit. In fact, we've skipped around the circuit, coming through Budget into the yellow pages, the left-hand corner. This is the old part of the circuit. In fact, down now into the left and right S's. Exiting here, 4th gear, up to 5th gear, coming up into West Bank, down into 2nd, the first part, 2-part left-hand corner. Snatching 3rd gear, the 2nd part. There's a bump in the middle of that corner, which most cars were being unsettled by. The Williams is probably the only car that wasn't unsettled by the bump. Then down now into Continental, a tight 2nd, 3rd gear, depending on your ratios. Oversteer, look at that kind of left-hand lock, up into 4th gear, 5th gear, quick flick right, and then down into this corner. Really, this is the corner that's caused the most amount of problems throughout the weekend, this tight 2nd gear onto the pit straight corner, then back up through the gearbox, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th gear. Now, this flat out right-hand flick, staying to the right, then over to the left, still flat out, right up to the very edge of the track, then braking rightly, down to 4th gear, down to third gear for the second part of Nashua. That's the corner Nigel Mansell was off on yesterday afternoon. And now Senna coming up to one of the very, very quick corners. Budget. This is a flat-out sixth-gear corner.
We're on board with Nigel Mansell actually at the moment, driving back into the pits while we're looking right under our screen still at Nigel Mansell. The onboard cameras here in Kyalami being with McLaren and Williams. Although times might not be that significant today, Schumacher is the quickest so far, a 1:20.3, of course a long way off Nigel Mansell's pole position time. Senna second quickest, then JJ Leto, and JJ Leto is one of the lower drivers, and they're having a lot of problems. The car is very nervous, as JJ described it yesterday. He said the car just wants to jump off the track all the time, which is not the case with the Williams. It's one of the few cars which we've said it looks stable, it looks good. We've seen Michael Schumacher's car, who's very, very nervous. The Delaros are very nervous, and even the Ferraris and McLarens look unsettled from time to time. And here we are with Ayrton Senna again, going into that very fast right-hander just after start-finish. It's all flat in sixth.
Yeah, the cars are entering there around about 160 miles an hour. Flick to the right and keep the car tight to the right, then across to the left, and then back up through into this double left-hander at Nashua. Again, with Ayrton Senna. Senna's time, he just improved. In fact, his time to 1:21.194. I mean, that is really not particularly important, because as the session progresses and the drivers gradually again build up to speed, we'll see more of the front runners coming to the front of the times in this 30-minute session. The actual time in itself isn't as important as qualifying is, but it's a very important guide to the outcome of the race. Right now, Michael Schumacher tops the list, but we really don't think that will have an outcome in the race itself. Schumacher's time, I'm sure, will be eventually passed by Senna, by Berger, by the two Williams, and everybody will sort of find their natural position by the time the session finishes. But you do get our people up there at this early part of the on-time session on Sunday morning.
And if you wonder where Nigel Mansell was, he's only done one lap so far, and it's a 2:04, but that's really... He went out and went straight back into the pits again to check maybe suspension settings, and right this moment Nigel Mansell's getting back out on the track. John, what wonders me from time to time is why did they go out and go straight back into the pit? But you can answer that straight after the break, because we're going to have a small commercial break here on Eurosport. While we're driving with Gerhard Berger, we're back in a sec. Here at Kyalami, while we're riding with Gerhard Berger, the situation up the top is still the same with Michael Schumacher setting the pace at the moment. And John, just before the break, I said we see drivers go out at the start of the session and go straight back into the pits. Why is that?
The reason that they do that is because the car has been totally taken apart overnight. There will be a fresh engine, a complete fresh gearbox transmission. Each corner of the car, each suspension hub, wheel will be new. They come in pre-prepared sub-assemblies. They're all fitted onto the car on Saturday night. The car will then be rechecked, and when it goes out on Sunday morning, it is quite normal that the driver will do one lap and come in to enable the team to check the car over to ensure really that there hasn't been a water leak, an oil leak, a fuel leak, or any part. You know, people are human, and they do work enormously long hours, and sometimes obvious things get overlooked, so it's purely a safety check. Then you'll go back out and maybe do a run of 3 or 4 laps, come in and then have a discussion about how the car feels. That for me, that was the normal procedure, certainly, and I think most drivers today, they follow a similar pattern. It varies depending which driver is the number one driver. He may come in first or whatever.
Well, Nigel with his first flying lap. Nigel Mansell, who's actually out in his spare car at the moment. There's work being done on his race car, but it doesn't look too serious.
That's a very normal thing again for a driver to come in. He will go out in his race car or his spare car, do that one lap, get out of that car, get into the option, the alternative choice car. So he will run 2 cars, and it has to be done quite smartly, because those 30 minutes in fact evaporate so quickly when you're doing that you may not always get to do what you want to do. So Mansell has got the option of running 2 cars. Ayrton Senna likewise, and in fact in qualifying Senna did his time in his spare car, as did Nigel Mansell. So the 2 cars more or less identical, but you want to drive them just to confirm that both cars are absolutely perfect for you, because it is not unknown, I can assure you, at the 12th hour that suddenly something goes wrong with your race car and you've got to get into the spare car, and you want that spare car to be absolutely perfect.
Well, Schumacher is still quickest on 120.3, then it's Riccardo Patrese, 120.6, Ayrton Senna currently third quickest, a half-second slower than Patrese, then it's Martin Brundle, and then we get Olivier Grouillard and Carl Wendlinger, and Wendlinger, we must say, has been the star of the show so far, although Nigel Mansell just gone half a second quicker on that intermediate point than Michael Schumacher, so we expect him to take over that fastest time again. He's been fastest all through the session. Let's just check on Mansell's time. Indeed, Nigel going quickest, the 120.033, and Nigel has done it again. He's quickest of this session. But Wendlinger, with the March and the Ilmor engine, a tight budget, a good driver. He's fitting very tight in the car because he's very tall, but he's very quick.
Doing a very good job, and so are the March team. You know, a team that struggled throughout the winter time, didn't really know what the program would be for 1992. They've come here to South Africa, and really, I think, surprised a great deal of people, and I think maybe they've surprised themselves, in fact, because I don't believe they anticipated being quite so competitive, and also, in the case of Carl Wendlinger, very much overshadowed by his Mercedes-Benz teammate Michael Schumacher. But now that he's in a different car and he can develop as a driver, and he's got a competitive car, he's really blossoming. So Michael Schumacher is not the only star driver, let's say Germany stroke Austria, because in fact Wendlinger is Austrian, though most people think of him as being a German driver. But Nigel Mansell now, of course, back at the top of the times in this 30-minute unofficial session. And really, with the temperature as it is right now, it really, I think, suits the Williams car extremely well indeed, because this is a very high-tech car. It's almost a fly-by-wire car. Everything is controlled by hydraulics or electronics. And certainly in the case of electronics, they don't really like the extreme heat that Formula One cars generate. Even with the temperature drop as we've got today, it will help keep everything around the car that little bit cooler, which improves the reliability of the electronics. That is an area that is a potential problem for Williams. If, for example, we had a race running conditions like we had on yesterday afternoon when it was very hot indeed, maybe the reliability of the electronics may not be quite so well perfected as reliability would require. But right now, temperatures are perfect for Williams, for Mansell, and he's going to take full advantage of that.
Mansell here comes up to the highest point of the circuit. We said before, it's gone up and down a little bit like Brands Hatch did hairpin, like Drew. It just goes the other way, I suppose, where you sort of end up on the tabletop and then have to turn one way or another. Mansell not being very slow here, not being very quick either. He'll end up at time round about his fastest so far at 120.033. Schumacher still 3/10 behind that, and then Riccardo Patrese. Patrese has been off the pace all weekend. He's had problems with his car, he's had problems with his gearbox on Friday, and he's had problems with his general setup yesterday afternoon. Nigel, well, proving me wrong, a 19.7. He's going quicker all the time. And looking at Nigel at the moment, what's the time going to be like on full tank?
Well, I would expect the full tank time to be probably at the end of this 30-minute session, somewhere a high 18 or a low 19. Remember that he was doing middle 15s in a qualifying setup with race tires, I hasten to add, but with probably an engine that was specially prepared for qualifying, maybe able to rev higher, certainly with maybe a fuel that would be more applicable for horsepower rather than economy. Although economy, of course, in a circuit like Kyalami, 5,000 feet above sea level, really isn't a major factor. But the race engine setup will be marginally different to that for qualifying, so it will not have maybe the same horsepower that he had available in qualifying. But Mansell really looks very, very comfortable indeed. His intention, I believe, in the race, should he get the lead into the first corner, is to sort of set a blistering pace in those early 10 laps, let's say, open up a gap between his nearest competitor, one or two, that will be Ayrton Senna, and then really just consolidate and let Senna do all the chasing, let Mansell just maintain a pace and a rhythm, which, with the advantage that his car has got here, ought not to be very difficult, either physically or mechanically for the car.
Mansell chasing Johnny Herbert at the moment. Herbert currently 6th quicker, but still a 1:21.7, a quicker than anybody else again. Talking to the March people last night, they were really ecstatic with Carl Wendlinger qualifying in the top 7. But on the other end, they had one car non-qualifying, Paul Vermondo, who missed the cut by about a tenth of a second, which was really sad. Another team which was in the same situation was a Jordan team, who's got one car in, one car out, and yesterday 3 blown engines.
Yes, the Tessel Jordan Yamaha team were really distraught at the end of qualifying. They were very, very disappointed indeed, first of all for their South African sponsors, also for themselves, for Yamaha, because that is a car, a team with great potential. Yet yesterday it just all went wrong. It couldn't have gone wrong really in a worse place. But Mauricio Gugelmin is in the race, and of course again with these cooler conditions that we are seeing right now, that will be to their advantage. That was one of the problems that they did suffer throughout the 3 days of practicing and qualifying. They were overheating quite a lot. They don't know whether it was a fundamental cooling problem on the car or whether the problem was really being generated from the Yamaha engine. So they have a lot of work to do between now and Mexico, which again is another circuit at altitude, in fact even higher than Kyalami, though in March the temperature in Mexico City is probably much lower than it is here in Kyalami.
Mansell just completing another lap. He's still top of the list, 1:19.066. Michael Schumacher second, Riccardo Patrese in third place at the moment, then Ayrton Senna, Jean Alesi, Johnny Herbert, Ivan Capelli, and it's all changed at the top now. Ayrton Senna going quicker, 1:20.7, 1.7 seconds slower than Mansell at the moment. Brundle up to 5th, then it's Alesi up to 6th, Herbert up to 7th, Ivan Capelli is 8th, 9th is Gerhard Berger, and 10th, rounding up the top 10, the man who's going to start his 166th Grand Prix here, but has never won one, Andrea de Cesaris.
Well, Martin Brundle having a little pirouette. We haven't seen Martin do that very often over the weekend.
Well, he joins a long list of people who have.
Yes, indeed he does. And Martin had just done a very quick lap, his quickest lap, which brought him up to 5th place. Still basically over a second slower than Michael Schumacher. And really, I think we're going to see Schumacher out-qualifying and out-speeding Martin Brundle most of the year. But of course, in the race where it really counts, Martin Brundle's got a lot of experience.
Mansell bettered his own time actually, a 19.043, only marginally quicker than his own best time up till then. Schumacher a 1:20.3, Brundle a 1:21.1. And basically Schumacher walks around with a little air saying to Martin, what you can do, I can do better.
Well, Schumacher's very young, he's got just enormous enthusiasm for his motor racing. He reminds me very much of that great German driver, Stefan Bellof. When he would go into a racing car, on his first flying lap, he would just be blisteringly fast. He just had that knack. Schumacher's an identical driver, just gets in, nails the thing, and is instantly quick out of the box. Teammate Martin Brundle, of course, is new to the Benetton Ford. He's getting accustomed to the car, to how it reacts in all conditions. But I must say Martin has had a fairly good crack of the whip in winter testing. He did a lot of testing down at Paul Ricard recently, so he really ought to be familiar with the car in all conditions. But Schumacher's just got that lightning speed that for a more experienced driver, you tend to be more, let's say, prudent in how you use it. But at the end of the day, it's the race that counts. It's the race where you get your points. And Martin Brundle is a very seasoned, a very experienced race driver, and a very good race driver. And really where his greatest strength, I believe, lies, is in his ability to set up a race car for the Grand Prix itself. And it's no use having a car that is just fast if it damages tires or it is abusing the car. You've got to find a way to find speed as well as reliability and comfort in the car.
Comparing Schumacher with Bellof, they both came up the German way, going into sports car racing rather than what was in Bellof's time Formula 2 and now of course Formula 3000. Bellof came with Porsche, Schumacher came with Mercedes. Both had great stamina when they got into Formula 1 and both are blindingly quick, although Bellof never really could capitalize on that in Formula 1. And and let's hope Schumacher can. He dipped into the 19th, so he joins Nigel Mansell in the 19th, 7/10 of a second slower at the moment, and it's Riccardo Patrese up to third, maybe a second behind Michael Schumacher. Then it's Riccardo Patrese, a tenth quicker than Ayrton Senna. Martin Brundle in fifth still, Alesi, Wendlinger, Herbert and Capelli. And Mansell up for another flying lap, which is going to be slower than his fastest lap. Even Capelli in ninth must be a little bit frustrated, seeing his old car, driven by Carl Wendlinger, playing quicker.
Yes, there's a few oddities about in this 30-minute on-time session. Both the McLarens are not really, I think, running quite as quickly as they would expect to do. Ayrton Senna currently in fourth spot, but more worryingly, Gerhard Berger down in 10th. Now, as I say, these times in themselves don't reflect performance, but they are indicative of what the race could be like. So Berger's times are quite a lot slower than Senna's, indicating that Berger's not very happy with his race setup. Remember, the spare car is this race dedicated to Ayrton Senna, so Berger's got to work around the problems that he may have with his race car. Likewise, Michael Schumacher really, I thought, might not have been able to maintain his position in second place in this session. In fact, he's improved it. He's running just 0.7 of a second slower than Nigel Mansell. And that's a very, very impressive performance indeed. And again, maybe that car will be a lot more competitive here today in the race than we might have anticipated it being earlier in the proceedings.
Another man who must be really happy is Mauricio Gugelmin, who leaps into the top 10 in ninth position at 1:21.9, which is only a second or so slower than his qualifying time, which must be giving Eddie hope of a good finish.
I think what that does is just confirm that the problems that the team had throughout the weekend, principally cooling and engine unreliability, if they can actually get a grasp on both of those problems, the car is a quick car. The Yamaha V12 engine is a very good engine. If they don't get track time, you're not going to get the times. So Gugelmin in these cooler Sunday morning conditions, able to get a number of laps in sequence, and currently, well, he's just dropped down at the 10th because Berger's now up in the 6th spot, but it appears that in these cool conditions, the problems that inflicted the Yamaha engine and the Jordan team yesterday, to some extent have been overcome, and they're now getting a more true reflection of that team's performance, potential performance.
Mansell still quickest, followed by Schumacher, Riccardo Patrese in third, Senna and Brundle on fourth and fifth, and as you said, Gerhard Berger making a leap forwards up to sixth place. Alesi and Wendlinger, then it's Herbert and Gugelmin in the top 10 here at the moment. Looking at Martin Brundle, who's struggling to keep pace with Michael Schumacher, as we said earlier, but John reckons it could be a dark horse for a top position in the race. We're on board with Gerhard Berger, as we said earlier, the onboard cameras with the McLaren and the Williams cars, and Berger starting his lap.
Yeah, Berger improving yet again, although not improving position, but just a quicker lap. And Gerhard Berger had did a lot of testing with McLaren over the winter time. He spent a lot of time with that testing at Silverstone, so I was able to observe him from my little sort of nest above the pits at Silverstone. And it was noticeable that as the sort of winter season progressed, that Berger's confidence seemed to build, and he just seemed to become more comfortable than I've ever seen him in the McLaren team over the last 2 years. And it's a reflection of that confidence over this weekend, where he's been able to run more consistently close to Senna throughout all 3 days than we've seen at any point over the last 2 years.
If we sum up this warm-up session, John, Mansell, again, the quickest car. Maybe a surprise of Schumacher keeping up there in second place at the moment. Patrese being closer than Mansell than he's been all weekend, and more importantly, for the moment, being quicker than Ayrton Senna. Martin Brundle is up there, and again, Wendlinger, Herbert, Prüger, and André de Cesare being in the top 15.
Gerhard Berger now coming up to the end of another lap. There's barely 2.5 minutes left of this 30-minute on-time session, officially on-time session.
Gerhard Berger not improving on this lap. So no major drama here in Kyalami during this half-hour warm-up. No major blow-ups. Alesi, who's just gone a little quicker. Mansell still tops the list, followed by Schumacher, Patrese, Senna, Brundle, Alesi. Berger, Carl Wendlinger is up there, Johnny Herbert in 9th, and Olivier Crouillard in 10th place. This was the half-hour warm-up. We'll be back half an hour before the Grand Prix here in Kyalami. Hope to see you then from John Watson and Ellard Kalb.